So I got an email from a viewer that wanted me to talk a little bit about how to deal with the stress that comes from life and still perform effectively selling insurance, final expense, whatever it is. So I'm going to start by reading this person's email to kind of set up where we're going to go in this video. And then I'm going to kind of give you my tips, at least I try to think about when I deal with personal stress in my life. Everybody does on some level, and still am able to accomplish the big goals that I set out to do. So here is the email from Anonymous. He says, "Hi there, Mr. DeFord. I was wondering if you could do a video on the requested subject. I'm a new insurance agent, just licensed for 2 months, with some sales experience. With the new job, I'm quite stressed and anxious to be successful. I've got some concerns outside of the job, both financial and health, though, that are contributing to my stress. I believe the stress and anxiety I have is negatively impacting my sales pitch. What is the best way to stay on track and be successful when you're overloaded and in a mental rut? And how do you enter each call with a clear conscience? Thank you, Mr. DeFord." So let me kind of emphasize something I think is important to understand. So if this kind of message speaks to you on some level, if you're dealing with some kind of personal stress and you want to see success out of selling insurance, whatever it is you're selling, but you're dealing with life and trying not to get whatever's going on in your life to let it get in the way, and you're wondering, well, how can you do that? Again, it's hard to tell the person who wrote that, much less you out there, how to deal with your problems, right? I mean, we can only relate to what we've personally experienced. So to some extent, my advice, I guess you could say, is going to fall short. And I can only kind of parlay or relay what I've seen personally in my own life, and then, of course, helping other people who've been in my agency and try to give some kind of direction. But I do kind of think at some level it does fall short because, you know, all of us have our own individual burdens with our unique experiences in life, and it's very hard for somebody on a YouTube channel to, you know, diagnose problems for you and tell you how to fix them. So with that said, let me kind of give you my my kind of thoughts on stress and dealing with problems and trying to be successful at insurance, or really just to be anything successful at life. I'll tell you this, I mean, for most people who are successful, if you study the greats that have been successful, if you read their autobiographies or watch their videos, what you're going to see is a pattern formulate of what successful people go through before they become successful. Typically, you're not successful before you are successful. And there's this period of time that very few people really are aware of that is crucial to the development of the person seeking success, that could have shut them out or cause them to be mediocre and not ever achieve anything, but they work through it anyway. And I look at this as whatever that stress is in your life out there, or to any of you watching, think of it as kind of a defining moment of your life. You're going to have to deal with stress. It's a function of living. But great things can still be accomplished anyway. And you figuring out how to manage the problems you have that you're dealing with, whatever they may be, while simultaneously working towards achieving some kind of goal. If you can figure that out, there's a huge chance that you're going to have something extraordinary, something that's great, that's far beyond the pale. And I think with that said, it's worth considering and working and figuring out how to make something work than maybe thinking, well, I can't do it because of this thing. Well, there's always going to be that thing that's going to be an obstacle in life to success. It's better to think positively about it and think, well, how can I overcome despite my shortcomings to strive for this success goal in my life? So, you know, the things I can tell you here, first of all, financial stress definitely does play a role, as well as health stress. Again, I don't know what the specifics are. But the thing you got to remember, guys, is when you come into selling insurance, this is a performance-based business. You don't get paid until you sell something. And that means you have to go perform your presentation a lot before somebody actually buys, hopefully several people buy, and make this a lucrative enterprise. And everything that's going on in your life is going to have some bearing on what happens. The key thing is to know thyself well enough to understand what your short-term or your shortened limitations are, and work around them despite that. I know personally for myself, it took me a long time before I could shut my brain down and stop thinking about the problems, the financial problems I had early on. I failed the business a year in and financially struggled to a good extent in the first year to 2 years when I came back part-time. It took a while before I could shut that stuff down and not let it necessarily impact me. You really have to develop this kind of delineation, like separation of church and state, the separation of what's happening in your personal life to what's happening in your business life, and work in despite of the problems you have. And in some cases, you need to look at business possibly as an escape. A lot of people escape the stress that they have by pursuit of hobbies or other extracurricular activities. And maybe you should think about work that way. It's an escape from the problems that you have. And it's a way for you to perform and be something other than the problems you're engulfed in. So some kind of different ways to hopefully kind of think through this. I guess the kind of tips I could give you, again, it's so hard to do this, guys, in a general and a specific sense, because I think giving specific advice to a mass group of people is pretty insensitive and it's not necessarily thoughtful. So I can only kind of give you some broad generic strokes to kind of give you a direction and how to deal and overcome this. So a couple of things that I could just tell you I've personally done that made a big difference was, again, I mentioned earlier, is you got to condition your mind to understand what success looks like and what the pathway to becoming successful looks like. And the best thing I ever heard Tony Robbins ever say, Tony Robbins, of course, big time guru. If you're a Generation Z kid, you probably have no clue who this is, but guy is a very big, I guess, positivity type of person, motivator, that kind of thing. And one thing he suggested in some YouTube clip I watched was read autobiographies. And this is the one advice I ever listened to Tony Robbins on, and it made a huge impact on me. Seeing other people, of successful people, and their stories in their own words, you start to just naturally see patterns that people who are successful go through. I remember reading Ben Franklin's autobiography, and he was in a position to basically learn the craft of his father. He hated whatever that was. I can't remember, it was like candle making or something. And he wanted to be a printer, and he ran away from home, struggled on his own, and before he started making it in business back hundreds of years ago. And it wasn't that he was given everything or had this privilege that wasn't his to have, and he created this opportunity for him despite the circumstances he was in. And I think it's important to understand that this is kind of how everybody who's successful goes through. And I think if you embrace the struggles that you have as being kind of the defining thing in your life that's going to give you guidance to where it is you're going and being a part of this story that you're really actively writing for yourself, this is going to turn out to be something positive for you. And there's no real people who've been successful that haven't had severe, almost insurmountable odds and struggles they've had to overcome. So you're in good company, I guess, is one way to look at it. The second thing here is truly assess your stress, anxiety versus what others have experienced or experienced. So this is something, again, I tell myself, whether this applies to you or not is up to you. But every time I start to whine and complain about my circumstances or sound like a real idiot, or, even back when I was struggling and failing out, the things I think of is, the problems I have pale in comparison to, my ancestors. I think of my grandfather DeFord, who was a ranger in the Pacific Front, and, he killed many people. He carried that with him to his grave. He saw his brothers in combat die. He faced death for a long, long time. And I think, man, the stupid stuff that I think of, is pales in comparison to what, my family has struggled with and been through. And I don't have a right to complain about my circumstances, because it would really look infantile compared to those, my family that's gone before me. Not to mention, the multiple generations that we don't even know that struggled and survived and dealt with life or death circumstances and situations. Even if you think about what 100 years ago was like, 150, 200 years ago were like, and the odds that people faced, and we're complaining about, some guy slammed the door in our face and disrespected us with mean words. I mean, come on. So I say that to myself to slap myself out of the self-pity because I don't have problems. And maybe that's useful to you on some level to kind of remind you to put your problems in perspective they're probably not that big of a deal. Again, I don't know if they are. They might be a big deal. But I think it kind of helps to think about the struggles others have had to help kind of put yours in a frame of reference of severity. And last but not least, I do think that we're all here. Life is somewhat of a struggle. It should be. It's what defines our character. It defines who we are. And we get to know ourselves and understand ourselves better. And without struggle and sacrifice, life is kind of, uneventful, meaningless, without significance. I think all of us in life have a cross to bear. And what that's going to be is different for all of us. But I think it means something. It's significant. And you have to embrace the fact that you struggling, you're not alone. Every human being on the face of the planet has struggles. You just got to keep going. You got to embrace it. You got to bear it. And you got to persevere anyway. And that's the ticket, I think, in some sense of this business of success and selling insurance is you have to go through these odds, because I can tell you firsthand as a person who recruits agents nationally, most never do. They fall short. They succumb to their issues. They don't go the distance that it takes to be successful, and they fall into a pit of mediocrity that none of us want to. So all of these things you're experiencing, so the person who wrote this, look, this is part and parcel. This is part of your responsibility to carry this and work through it. And I think in a sense, the gods above are testing our wit, like in Conan, just to see what we're going to do and if we can work through it anyway. So there you go. For what it's worth, my advice on dealing with stress and still doing well and selling insurance. Hope something there sticks, has some utility for you to get through the hard times. I definitely have empathy, as I've been there, as many of us have, that have been through difficulties before experiencing success. So if you like this kind of content, please subscribe, like the video. There's links above or below you can click on to join my channel or subscribe to it. And click the links above or below to learn more about my agency as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. David DeFore logging off. See you next time. Goodbye.